G'day gals, welcome back to the pod. Thank you so much for being here as always. I'm going to get straight into it today. Today we're going to talk about two things that could potentially be wrecking your physique or your progress, etc. So I'm going to speak predominantly today to females because I work with females, but this is also applicable to everybody. And we're going to talk about two things today. One of them is nutrition related and one of them is training related. With the nutrition thing, this is also really applicable to athletes as well. So I work predominantly with either athletes or gym girls or both, like people that are dabbling in both. So with our athletes doing things like runs, triathlons, sport, performance goals, we rattle these things off every week. And then obviously our gym girls that are more into like strength training, trying to build their shape, increase their lifts, etc. Obviously, I'm all for both of these things. I absolutely love it. And like I said, it's predominantly what I work with in my business. So the first thing we're going to look at today that could be wrecking our physique could also be wrecking our recovery in terms of like muscle recovery. And you guys will see what I mean when we get into it. So I think this one is applicable to pretty much every person I work with and anyone who listens to the pod, because once I start getting into this, if you've listened to the last couple of months, like the episodes we've done this year, we've spoken heaps just about like fueling training, fueling progress, building shape, fueling our lifts, recovering, the process of recovery, like what the body's actually going through. And if we think about everything I just said there, our athletes and our gym girls are both going through all of those things. Like regardless of what category you fall in, or maybe you don't even fall in a category, but if you're listening to the pod and you're into nutrition training, you want to be fueling it, you want to be recovering from it, you want to understand it, you want to make sure you're doing what you need to do to fuel your recovery and build your shape and physique if that's a goal of yours. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and the first thing that could be wrecking our physique/muscle recovery, is consuming shitty quality protein sources. And we're going to break down exactly what this means today. We might have some listeners who understand this. We might have some that have literally never heard of this. I think we've dabbled in this in the pod over the years, like we've brought this convo up. I feel like it's one of those things where like just educating people about protein in the first place, if someone's a beginner and they've never really focused on protein consumption or anything like that, we've got to start small. Like we can only introduce people to so much in one go. So usually we just want people to start understanding protein, monitoring their protein, making sure they're getting enough. And that's usually a process over time. So if somebody's dabbling in that, I personally don't like to then come in and be like, and now did you know that there's actually good quality proteins and not so good quality proteins? That's going to make this probably even just a little bit harder for you. So it's one of these things where it's like you got to pick your battles and pick your moments as to when to talk about it and when not to. But I feel like we're in a position now, like when I think about so many of my clients, they're awesome, they're advanced, they're getting after it, like they're getting enough protein. If you're not getting enough protein in 2026, you're doing something wrong, right? And you got to go back and binge the pod and buy some of our ebooks and just get immersed in this shit, because if you're still behind on protein, catch up. Just catch up, all right? So I'm going to assume that we've caught up. I'm going to assume everyone listening is aware of protein and getting pretty sufficient protein. And I feel like we have such a cool audience and I have such cool clients that are in a position where they're like, no, Rubes, I want to know the next level. Like we get it. Protein is so 2017, right? We all learned about it then. We want to learn about the next level. How can we make this shit even better? And if we think about like the title and the point of the episode being things that could be wrecking your physique, if you're someone who's like busting your ass to go to the gym, like you've got a good structured program, we're going to talk about that soon, but you're like getting after it, you're putting in the effort, you're training hard. If there's little things that we can bring your awareness to, that's like you could ramp this up to get more progress and like have more to show for the effort you're putting in. I feel like my girls are chomping at the bit for that, and it's cool. So if we dive into this shitty quality protein for a second, I'll explain like the technical terms so we don't have to keep referring to it as shitty quality protein. But with protein, we have what we call complete protein and incomplete protein. And this might be the things you've heard of before. A complete protein, or like a food that is labeled as a complete protein source, means that it contains all 9 of the essential amino acids that the body cannot produce on its own. So this is a little bit sciencey, a little bit technical. You don't have to like fully know all of this and understand this to think about in your day-to-day life, but it is cool to just kind of break it down and actually understand what we're talking about when we say complete or incomplete protein. So like I said, a complete protein contains all 9 of the essential amino acids that the body cannot produce on its own. So a simple way to explain this is think about amino acids as like little building blocks that make up our protein, and they're the things that the body uses to build and repair muscle. And then just to segue for a second to help people kind of understand this, we also have what's called non-essential amino acids, which means the body can produce those. So it's not crucial that we get those from our food because the body can produce them itself. If we come back to these 9 essential amino acids, the reason they're called essential amino acids is because it is essential that we get them through the diet because the body can't get them any other way. And then if we come back to the fact that amino acids are like the little building blocks that make up protein and are the thing that the body uses to build and repair muscle. If we think about, if you're a regular listener, you'll start to really understand this. We've spoken about that process of muscle protein synthesis, meaning we go into the gym, we train hard, we get muscle protein breakdown, and then that muscle goes through what we call muscle protein synthesis, where it starts the rebuild and the recovery process. We've spoken about the fact that when the body goes through that process, it wants to draw on things like energy and it wants to draw on protein. And if we break that down a little bit more, it wants to draw on the amino acids that make up protein. If we then think about the fact that there are 9 amino acids that the body's going to look for when it's going through this process, if we haven't given those to the body through diet, it doesn't have them. So then we think about the fact that it's like, okay, cool, I'm training hard to try and build my muscle, to build my shape, to build a toned physique. We've spoken about all this shit so much. If you're new here, you need to go back and binge the pod. You got a lot to learn. But this is why we train, especially if you're a gym girl and you're in there getting after these lifts, trying to do your hip thrust and your leg press and your hack squats and all these things to build a booty, build your legs, etc. That's awesome. We break down those muscles because we train hard. We've got our good structured program, all the things Rubes is telling us to do. If we then leave the gym and the body then starts to go through muscle protein synthesis, like I said, it's going to look for those amino acids. If it has not been given them through the diet, it doesn't have them. And therefore it's trying to go through this process optimally, but it can't go through it optimally because it's like, I don't have what I need to do this. So that's just a cool way to think about it, because then if we come back to my comment about the fact that we can have good quality protein sources or shitty quality protein sources, when we talk about, like when I talk about, I'm probably a little bit biased and a little bit judgy with this. Like I see people talking about their quote, like protein foods, and my mind straight away goes, that's such a shit source of protein. Stop telling people, like stop labeling that as protein. Stop telling people that that's okay. And it's like I said, I'm probably a bit biased. I'm a bit judgy. It is okay. We'll talk about that in a second. But I just think about the fact that I've got girls that want to absolutely optimize this shit. And if we don't understand this and know this, then really there is like shitty quality protein that we could be filling our day with and not realizing. And I'll keep explaining all this a little bit more, but I feel like it's just worth saying, guys, like if you're someone who's sitting there going, oh my God, like it's hard enough to get protein, it's shit enough to think about this, and now I have to think about this whole next level. Like, I get it. It's one of those things where I'm like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, I almost get like nervous, or I think twice about doing episodes like this, because I think like, some people just don't want to hear this because they're like, oh, bloody Ruby told me now I have to think about different types of protein. Like, where does it end kind of energy, right? So I'm always in two minds where I'm like, well, if there's things I know my girls could benefit from and get better results if they knew about, I want to tell them. But then I'm also mindful that people just love to see that light, fluffy content where someone's like, oh my God, like I made these Biscoff protein muffins, whatever. And then I'm looking going, the protein in that is effing shit. But people don't want to hear that because they're like, no, I just want the Biscoff protein muffins, right? So I understand if you're hearing this and you're just like, oh, for God's sake, here's another thing I have to think about. Like always, guys, no one's going to gun to your head. You don't have to think about anything, but I think it's cool info to know. And if we start to get into like what this actually looks like in terms of our day-to-day eating, our complete protein sources are the more common protein sources you will see people like myself talk about. So if we think about things like meat, dairy, eggs, whey protein powder, casein protein powder, the good news for our vegetarian listeners is that tofu and soy do fall into the complete protein category, which is cool. And there's a few other things like quinoa does as well. But then if we look at that for a second, I'll try not to get too off topic, but when you look at something like quinoa, it's like, yeah, it does have like a quote complete protein source, but to get like a decent amount of protein out of that meal, I've got to like eat a fair bit of it. With that comes a lot of calories, a lot of carbs, which is totally fine. I'm not anti-calories or carbs. You guys know that for sure. But if we think about something like a chicken breast or like a whey protein shake, even tofu, if we look at like how much protein we get for the calories in that thing, it's way more like strategic. It's way more bang for your buck. It's like, this is just predominantly protein that I'm getting from this food. If we come over and look at things like quinoa and a few other things, even if we go into like eggs, dairy, etc., yes, we get a good hit of protein, but we also get other nutrients with them, which again, I'm not anti-nutrients at all, but it's just cool to kind of understand and think about and be aware of, especially if you're someone who's like strategically trying to get more protein into your day because you realize it's a bit of a struggle for you. Often we're trying to get that protein in without a bunch of other calories and nutrients coming with it. So just kind of important to understand that. If I can remember, I'll try and make some Insta content about this when this episode comes out so we can like have some visuals of what all this looks like. But then if we come over to the incomplete protein sources, this is where we start to look at things like nuts and seeds and lentils and beans and things like that. And this is cool to start to understand, because if we do see things like almonds, or I feel like peanut butter actually is a huge one, where they will label it as like protein, like good source of protein. It's like, first of all, what are the legal requirements around that? Like, we should not be able to write good source of protein on a packet of almonds, because if we do the maths on like how many calories and how much dietary fat and everything we're getting just to get maybe like 6 grams of protein, it's like, don't call this a quote good source of protein, right? Like, there's a little bit of incomplete protein in there. Now we understand why you don't write that on the front of the packet, right? But I'm going off topic. I'll bring it back. But if we think about things like peanut butter, even like the nut bars that we start to see now, you know, like in that section, I feel like the section of the supermarket that is like muesli bars and similar, it just gets bigger and bigger every week. And it's usually with boxes of things like this that have protein written on the front. And then when you actually look at it, it's like, this has like 8 grams of protein. And then when you start to understand, and they're counting all this protein from nuts and seeds that are an incomplete protein source, it's like, no way, if you're someone who's serious about their training and their physique and their strength goals and their recovery, no way should we be looking at shit like that as our source of protein. And I should just say, guys, like, if you didn't know all this stuff and you're like, oh my God, I've been doing that, like, no shame, no judgment. We don't know what we don't know. That's why I'm here. That's why I do decide to bring these episodes forward, because I want people to understand this stuff, because I think one of the problems that we're seeing now is the awareness around protein has really peaked over the last 10 years, which is awesome. Like, getting good quality and good quantity protein into your day is an absolute game changer for physique goals. I would go as far to say, in my opinion, getting sufficient quantity of good quality protein into your day is something that will make or break a like toned, lean physique. I genuinely believe that, probably more than anything. Like, good structured training, obviously, but then consistent good quality protein in the right amounts for you, I think is the key thing that will build a physique. I want to say it 10 more times, but that's why I want to bring these episodes forward, because if we have people that are starting to learn about all this stuff and get the awareness of protein, and then you're like walking through the shops and you're seeing all this random shit with like protein written in big letters on the front of it, and you're like, oh my God, that's awesome, because I'm trying to eat more protein because I've got all these goals and people are telling me that protein will help with these goals. I think we can end up in this shitty position where it's like, I feel like I'm doing everything people are saying, but I'm not really getting the result. This could be why. And that's going to be dependent on like how much of this you're doing. Like, it's not to say, guys, and I was going to get into this, I feel like we may as well get into it now. It's not to say that we shouldn't eat those foods or we can't eat those foods and they shouldn't contribute towards our day, but we want to have this good overall understanding that we do want the majority of our protein to come from those good quality protein sources. And then if we're filling any gaps or snacks or whatever with extra little things, like, that's totally fine. But overall, you want to be able to look at your day and go, I've got several very good quality, decent quantity, like decent portion serving sizes of good quality protein coming in. And again, in my opinion, this is honestly the shit that is separating the people that are like really optimizing their training, their physique, and have been for a long time, versus the people that are kind of twiddling their thumbs, spinning their wheels, being like, oh yeah, like I kind of think about protein or whatever. But then if we were to like pull apart your day, it's like, there's not a lot of good quality protein coming in here in decent hits. And what I mean by that is, if we want to look at how we would like tangibly put together a good day that does tick off complete good quality protein that I'm talking about, most females that I work with have a protein target or a minimum protein requirement of anywhere from like 100 to 150. Like it's very common for females to be around like 120, 130, right? So in my opinion, I think we should be looking for like 4 servings, give or take. Like you might do 3 big meals or you might like to go for 5. But if we can think about 4 servings that have like 25 to 40 grams of protein. And again, you can have flexibility with this. Like maybe you do 5 meals that are around the 25 gram mark, or you do some meals that are up around 40 and then a couple that are around 25. We don't have to nitpick those exact numbers, but guys, for like the second week in a row, if you're watching on YouTube, Nutella just rolled over and knocked the camera. So we're in a new position, but we're going to keep going. What I was saying there is we don't have to like nitpick the numbers. We don't have to have exact amount at exact times. But if we think back to other things we've covered about protein on the podcast before, the body doesn't store protein. So we've spoken about the fact that we do want fairly regular hits of protein coming in throughout the day. So the body doesn't store it, meaning like if we have a massive serve in the morning and then we don't have any protein for the rest of the day, the body doesn't just hold on to that and just go like, oh, I'll just use it later or I'll use it tomorrow or whatever. If we don't use it, it just gets flushed out. So this is why we talk about wanting to have regular, consistent feedings of protein. Again, come back to someone who's maybe having like 4 sort of main meals a day or 4 good meals in a day. If we can have like 30-ish grams of protein in each one of them, well, you're looking at 120 grams. And if you're getting it at like morning, lunch, afternoon, dinner, that's awesome because that really combats both of those things we just spoke about with like getting the regular hits on a consistent basis. If we then look at the quality of the protein in those times, this is what, again, in my opinion, is sorting the people who are consistently getting wicked results from the ones who aren't. When we're consistently getting wicked results and we understand training and nutrition and all these things, we're usually not looking for like random different protein sources. We understand that like if I'm going to have 3 to 5 good serves of protein a day, they're going to come from good quality protein powder. So like whey protein, in my opinion, is the gold standard. We can obviously look at like casein, soy protein, but they're usually going to give us like around 30 grams. If we then look at something like I said before, maybe like yogurt, dairy, some sort of meal with that in it, eggs is another great one. And then meat or like meat alternative seafood, obviously, or things like tofu if you don't eat meat. And if we look at planning out our days of eating, and I reckon we're going to have so many regular listeners, so many gym girls, so many athletes, so many people listening going, yeah, those foods are just super consistent in my days. And maybe you have days where it's like eggs and then like a yogurty kind of dairy thing, and then maybe a protein powder and 1 serve of meat. And then maybe you have other days where it's like protein powder in the breakfast, serve of meat for lunch, protein shake in the afternoon, more meat for dinner. And then maybe you have days where you randomly have eggs for dinner and you have meat for lunch and you do dairy for breakfast. Like you can mix these things up. And like I said before, you might spread it into like 3 big meals or 5 slightly smaller ones. All of that is fine if we're continuously coming back to looking at our day and going, I'm getting a decent amount of protein in overall. I've spread it fairly evenly across the day. And now that I'm learning about the quality or the type of protein, I can see that I do have some really good complete protein sources coming in as well. And then that's where, like I said before, it's not to say that the incomplete protein sources are quote bad and we should avoid them, but we should just understand that we do want to prioritize those complete protein sources. And if you look at your day and you're like, I've got a really good complete protein source at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe your afternoon snack is like a protein bar and some nuts or something like that, where you're like, okay, cool, it's not technically the complete protein source, but I can also see that I have really good complete protein coming in as well. And if we think about those incomplete protein sources for a second, like we said before, it means that they don't contain all 9 of the essential amino acids. So if we kind of piece this together for a second, if we have got all 9 of those through a lot of other meals throughout the day, it's not like the body's going to go, oh, but that one meal in the afternoon, we only got 6 of those amino acids, not all 9. So everything's gone to shit, right? It's like anything where we want to be able to step back over time and look at our average consumption and our consistent habits and go, for the most part, am I getting really good hits consistently of good quality protein coming in. That's really what we want to be able to say. And the last thing, I feel like I should have mentioned this sooner. I think we're going to have some vegetarian listeners or maybe some nutrition professionals listening thinking like, she better say this. I am going to say it. I just haven't found the window to bring it up. We can combine incomplete protein sources to make a complete protein source. And again, that might sound a little bit confusing, but if we break it down, it actually makes a lot of sense because again, the incomplete protein sources means they don't have all 9 of the essential amino acids that the body needs. If a food had like 6 of those and we paired it with another food that did have the other 3, and then obviously when they're combined and we eat them in one meal combined, we're getting all 9. Well, then that does make a complete protein source. So I'm not going to get into that too much today. I don't specialize a lot in like vegetarian, vegan stuff, but that's definitely something you could Google pretty easily, like food pairings to make complete protein sources or something like that. You'll be able to find plenty of info on that, but it's just cool to understand because if you're sitting there as someone who doesn't eat a lot of animal products and you're like, oh my God, does that mean I can't make this work? You can make it work. You're just going to have to be a bit more strategic. That's just like another factor you're going to have to work with. And again, don't shoot the messenger. So this is my first tip on the thing that might be wrecking your physique or your recovery, like I said, and it's just cool to have a think about and to understand. And obviously, if you're a client of mine, reach out. We can talk about it in more detail if you need to. And like I said, we'll try and make a little bit of content about it around the time this episode comes out, if I remember. But it is just a cool thing to understand. If you feel like you're completely across protein and you are ready to like learn about next level little things you should be thinking about. I personally wouldn't even call this a little thing. I would call this a big thing. To me, this is like a non-negotiable. This is a big factor in my day. And again, anyone who's followed for a while or has our ebooks or sees the meals we talk about online, now that I've rattled off those complete protein sources, look at any meal, any day on a plate, anything that's ever come out of my business, and you'll be like, yeah, wow, there's always really clear, complete protein sources making up the bulk of these meals. And if we again just think about why this is applicable to gym girls and athletes, if we are training hard and pushing the body to that point of muscle protein breakdown, it then starts to go through the recovery process, i.e. muscle protein synthesis, and is literally actively looking for these 9 essential amino acids. If the body's in a position where it's like, I don't have them, because I can't produce them on my own and I also haven't been given them through diet, then like I said before, it's hard to optimize that process. And if we're not optimizing that process, are we optimizing our physique and our results and our training and everything that we're busting our ass for? So important to think about. We're going to move on to point number 2. Point number 2 is probably a little bit more applicable for our gym gals. So the girls that are training in the gym to want to like build their shape, build their strength, tone up, have a lean physique, hit heavy lifts, all of these things. First of all, like I always say, I love it. You guys know this is my absolute jam. I could talk about this all day, but there is one thing I see that first of all pisses me off, and second of all makes me think, oh, I wish you knew how much this could be wrecking your progress. So I should say, even though I'm saying it pisses me off, again, this is one of these things like where if people don't understand it, it makes sense that people are doing this and are like not really seeing the harm in it. Shouldn't say that there's harm in it, but we definitely risk it having a negative impact on our physique progress if we're doing this thing. And the thing that I'm talking about is substituting exercises from your program, and more so substituting them without talking to your coach or your trainer and finding the right substitute. I cannot stress this enough, guys. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't care that much, you're probably like, Rubes, dramatic much? Like, chill out. But again, I think about my girls that are like busting their ass in the gym, getting up early, hitting heavy lifts, paying me because they want the results. And then you see someone substitute something and you're like, oh, that's a massive hit to your results that you're really working hard for. So the reason this can be such a problem is we've spoken a lot about training over the years, and I think some people don't realize that when we write a structured training program, it is very intentional. We don't just pick 4 lower body exercises or 5 lower body exercises and be like, there's your leg day. We pick them so strategically to work with each other. And depending on the person and their goals will depend on like what we're actually looking for and what we want to make sure we include in that program. But things that are worth considering here is we're often looking at different ways we can push weight, different ways we can pull weight, thrust weight, abduct, And then we look at working through things like hip extension, hip flexion, knee extension, knee flexion. And then we also look at working muscles through shortened ranges and lengthened ranges. And if I lost you anywhere along the way, that makes sense, because if you're not a qualified trainer or coach, or you haven't studied this stuff, it makes sense that that stuff doesn't make a lot of sense to you. And that's why you're paying someone or you're getting a program from someone who it does. But what we really have to clock right there is if you don't understand those things, which again, makes sense that you don't, but if you don't understand them, then you don't understand what to substitute things for. So if you look at your program and you're like, oh, my gym doesn't have that, or someone's always on it, maybe it's broken, maybe I come at peak hour, or it's really hard to get on that machine, all of those things are fine. Like I talk to my girls about this all the time, but that is my point. Like I say to my girls, talk to me about it. Tell me if your gym doesn't have it. If you do go at peak hour, like it's so common for people to go to gym at peak hour and be like, Rubes, there's no way I can get on the leg extension or the leg curl. And so what we commonly see there is they'll just pick something else. And then when I see what they've picked, I'm like, oh, that's really not a substitute for that movement. And if we think about the fact that like you've come to me, you've told me your goals, there's certain things you want to work on, we've written the program factoring in all that shit I just said before. And then you look at the session that's actually been completed, and then you see a big substitute like that, and you're like, wow, that just bucked that whole system. And again, some people might be like, well, Rubes, it's not that deep. But to me, it is that deep, because as soon as I look at it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't work. And you've come to me because you want this shit to work. And so like I was saying before, this is something that I work on with my girls. When my girls first get started with me, this is why I have a call. If anyone's ever started coaching with me and been like, I don't think I need to have a call, I'm like, no, I need to have a call to talk to you about what equipment your gym has, what they don't have, what you like, what you don't like, what you can't get access to. Like there's so many things that I'm then going to go away and think about all the shit that we want to include in the program for you and your goals, but then what limitations we have because of your setup or injuries or anything at all. And so that's exactly why we go through that initial process. And then usually once we put a program in place for someone and they're working through that first week, sometimes they might reach out to me and be like, hey, my gym didn't have this or that didn't work, etc. And obviously we just navigate that at the time. Or if they get to the end of the first week and I haven't heard from them, I'll reach out and be like, how was the first week? Any problems? Anything we need to know about? Because like we've spoken about so many times on the podcast before, the point of training is consistent progression, meaning what we do in the first week, we then want to go back to gym in week 2 and do it all again. And then go back in week 3 and do it all again. And week 4 and week 5. And I personally do this with my clients for 10 weeks. So we want to have the same consistent program in place for 10 weeks. So we can go back each week and do the same movements, but progress with them. So if you go through that first week and then you realize like, oh, Rubes has put something in the program that my gym doesn't have or it doesn't work for me, whatever, we want to know about that straight away, because then I'll change it straight away. And then you go into week 2 and we know that things are going to work for you. And then you can progress through that for the next few months. If there's something that doesn't work for you, but like you don't voice it or I don't ask about it or whatever, people then just go in and like I said, pick a really random exercise and it just doesn't work for you and your goal and the other exercises in the program. That's the big thing, is like we're trying to tick off multiple things in a session depending on you and your goals. So every exercise is intentional. It's specific for that reason. And guys, this is why I'm constantly harping on about structured training programs, because when people go into the gym and just wing it every week, again, I just look and I'm like, my God, you're going to so much effort to work towards something, but you're not doing the right work. And again, you don't know that because that's not what you've studied. That's not what you should know. But this is why I'm such a fan of structured programming and why I'm such a fan of structured personalized programming, because we can have these combos. We can tweak things to suit you, your strengths, your weaknesses, your gym setup, the access you have to equipment, etc. And then we can make sure like every exercise in your program is going to work with every other exercise. It all makes sense. It's the most optimal thing we could have in place, considering everything we just mentioned. And you can progress through that for the next few weeks and months. If you're looking at a program, whether it's from me or from someone else, and you're like, oh, I don't really like that, or my gym doesn't have that, or I don't feel like that today, I might just jump on this thing instead. This is where we really start to lose the structure and the cohesion of the program, because it's like all of these things were working together really well, but then we just took one of them out. Maybe we've brought something in, and this is what we see, like people will bring something in and an educated brain will look at it straight away and go, you basically just did that same movement over on the other machine. And that's not to say that that's bad or wrong, but then it's like the thing that we originally had in the program, is probably a movement that we haven't already done in this session and we want to make sure we do in this session, and you've just taken it out and brought in something that you've already done. So now we're in this position where it's like, an example here might be, we want to have a push and a pull in the program. You take out the pulling movement, you bring in a pushing one. It's like, well, now you've pushed weight twice and you haven't pulled weight at all. And that doesn't sound like that big of a deal on its own, but if people are doing this over time, like if you were to do that for your whole program, then you get to the end of it and it's like, well, there's a massive imbalance here. And then this can just start to create like weird physique imbalances, or it can just halt our progress because there's a big movement missing that would really help with our progress. Obviously, we can start to risk injuries if something is getting worked on heaps and something is getting left for dead. And then the other thing that can play out here is if people do want to take an exercise out and they just pick something randomly and then they go back the next week and do that same session, take it out again, but pick something else random. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now not only have we taken out the thing we really wanted in there, but now we're doing something completely different every week in its place. So we've got no progression. We've got no structure. We're just literally doing random shit week after week. So again, I feel like this might be something where people who don't care that much or who aren't as educated or whatever it might be might just be sitting there being like, it doesn't matter that much. But personally and professionally, I think it does. Like personally, I would hate to think that I've paid someone and I've gotten a really well-written, structured program and then I've butchered it. Because it's like, well, what was the point in paying that person? And then professionally, like I said, when I start talking to people, I'm always in awe of the girls that I work with, because all the girls that I work with are workers, business owners, mums, athletes, gym girls, all of the above. Whatever you're doing, like people are doing so much. And then they're like, yep, Rubes, I get up every day at 4:15 to get to the gym, or I go every night after work. I go on the weekends if I have to, like I just make it work because I want to do it. I want the results, etc. So then that's when my mind is like, well, I want to put the best shit in place for you to get those results. If you then tweak that, again, you've kind of defeated the purpose of coming to me. And so my biggest piece of advice for people in this position, guys, like I said before, I understand that not every gym has everything, or you might go at a crazy time and it's hard to access things. But what I would think about is, if there is something in your program, first of all, if you work with me, hit me up straight away. Like we shouldn't be at this point because this is why I hit you up. But if you're working with someone else or you're doing your own training or whatever, I would be thinking about if there's any movements in your program that you're consistently or like fairly regularly having to substitute. I would do the research, whether you book in with me or you get a coach or you do whatever you have to do to make sure that the things you're substituting make sense and actually do serve as a substitute for the thing that you've taken out. Because you just want to know that you're doing the most and you're getting the most out of your training. And so those are my two pieces of advice for today. Do a bit of an audit of your regular protein sources, where your protein is coming from most of the time, and make sure that you've got that good quality, consistent, complete protein coming in on a regular basis. Make sure you understand that. Don't fall for that shitty protein marketing that is all over everything at the moment. And then come across to your training and do that same little audit. Are there exercises that I'm constantly having to tweak or change? And so what would I have to do to actually just make more of a permanent change? Do I talk to someone? Do I buy a program? Whatever it is. I don't know. There's that much effing training all over the internet. You'll find something. But really just making sure that you do have good substitutions in place if you need them. And then overall, you've got that good structured training program in place that actually works with each other, like the exercises in it really work with the other ones. That is the point of a program. And like I said before, guys, with the protein, I genuinely believe that is something that will make or break a physique, especially over time. And then when I said that comment before, I said doing that, like having that complete protein alongside a good structured program, those are the two things, in my opinion, that are the difference. And I see them as the difference between the girls that have been getting wicked results and progressing over the last few years versus the ones that are like, yeah, I go to gym and I think about this shit, but I'm not really getting anywhere. I would double down on making sure you've got good quality protein in place and you've got a wicked structured progressive training program in place. And then from there, just stick with that shit. Consistency is key. If we have good quality stuff in place, we then want to consistently have it in place over and over and over again. And the more you do that over time, the more you're going to move into that category of being someone who's getting the most out of their nutrition and training and getting the results and the progress to show for it. that is all from me today. Like always, guys, if you got something out of this episode, please chuck it on your Instagram story and tag us, share it with your friends, share it with your gym gal buddies, because again, we got women busting their ass to try and get wicked results. If there's things we can do to help that is literally what I'm here for. So thank you so much, like always, and I'll be back very soon. The Eat Like Ruby podcast is not a substitute for professional medical or dietary advice. The advice given in this episode is general in nature and should not be used to treat any medical conditions, health conditions, illnesses, injuries, and/or any nutrition-related conditions, deficiencies, or similar. This podcast is not to be used as or in place of medical advice or dietary advice. Please consult your healthcare professional before implementing any of the advice, information, or protocols discussed in this episode.